Installing PyQT on Microsoft Windows. Hello everybody, this is Ben Fingal, and in this nugget we're going to take a look at the tools that you need to get PyQT up and running in your development environment. Now, installing PyQT is a little bit different for each different operating system that you might be working in, so we're going to take a look at how to get it up and running on Microsoft Windows. First, let's take a look at what tools we're going to need installed in order to work with PyQT inside of our environment. It's not a typical scenario where you're just downloading a library into Python using something like pip or PyPI. You actually need a couple of different pieces in order to work with it. So you're going to need something called the SIP library, and you're going to need the Qt library, and then lastly you're going to need PyQT, and we're going to use PyQT 4. PyQT 5 doesn't really run with Python 3.0 since we're working with Python 2.x, 2.7 in my case. We want to stick to PyQT 4. Now, PyQT 4 and PyQT 5 are different enough that you probably want to also stick with PyQT 4 if you're going to follow along with the nuggets in this course. They all use PyQT 4 and Python 2.x, so you're going to get a little bit lost. It's not going to be exactly the same if you try to translate what I do into PyQT 5, but go ahead and do so if you're feeling adventurous. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So this may look a little bit complicated, but there's a good reason we need all this stuff, and the ultimate reason is that the Qt library, the user interface library that we're going to work with, is actually written in the C programming language. Qt is written in C, not in Python, and that's a problem because we have PyQt, which is written in Python, right? This is the .python language. So we need to execute the Qt library inside of Python, but the question is, how do we do that? After all, C is not Python. Python cannot natively execute C programming language, even though Python is ultimately written in C. We need some kind of translation. Well, Riverbank Software, the people who make PyQt, also have that translator, and it's something called SIP. And what SIP is going to do is SIP is going to translate a C library into Python for us and allow us to run this Qt library right up in Python. And that's what all three of these utilities do. Now, thankfully, on the Windows operating system, it's really easy to get these installed. They've bundled it all up into an installer package for us. Let's take a look at that. In order to install PyQt, you're going to go to the riverbankcomputing.com software PyQt download page. This is where you'll download PyQt from. And you can see here that if you want, you can go ahead and download and install, build and install SIP. You can get the PyQt Windows source from this link right here. You can build it from scratch from the source code yourself if that's the kind of thing that you're into. But thankfully, if we scroll down just a little bit further here, you'll notice this. The binary packages contains everything needed for PyQt except for Python itself. So once you have Python installed, you can go ahead and just scroll down here and download the proper version and installer for whatever version of Windows you're on. I happen to be on Python 2.7 and a 64-bit version of Windows, so I'm going to download this file right here, just a Windows 64-bit installer. And once that's finished downloading, I'm just going to go ahead and launch it and let it run the install package on my system. Pretty much all the defaults are going to be just fine. You'll notice it includes the Qt developer tools, the SIP developer tools, the Qt runtime, start menu shortcuts, everything we need. So there's my Python installation in C:\whack Python 27. Just let this installer run, and when it's done, I'll be ready to execute a PyQT demonstration application. So now that it's finished, I'll go ahead and click Finish, and I'm just going to bring up my sample application here. And you can see the relevant command in Python for working with PyQt is from PyQt 4 import Qt GUI. I needed to run that install package before that was actually going to run. After that, I have a real simple, straightforward application. I create my Qt app object, I create a new window widget, give it a title, my first GUI app, and then execute it. So let's go ahead and see this run, see this in action. Just from my command prompt here, I'm going to run Python pyqt1.py. And you can see what happens here is I get a little window that is sized, what? Guess what? 250 by 150. And the title is my first GUI app, and I can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. Just by default, I can resize it, move it around, etc. So there you have it. Real easily, simply, and quickly, we installed PyQt on our Windows system. And that concludes this nugget on installing PyQt on Microsoft Windows. We took a look at how you can download the installer package for PyQt, and that includes the base libraries, all the different base libraries that you need to work with Qt, including the Qt library that's written in C, the SIP translator library to translate Qt into Python, and the PyQt library itself. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.